I'm down in Homa tonight in Terrebonne and Lafourche parishes. There are still probably more than 10,000 people who are living in temporary housing. That is the situation on the ground in the Bayou parishes. They have made a ton of progress, but there is still a long way to go to recover from Hurricane Ida. And just about every aspect of life has been touched here, from the roads to emergency services, even to something as simple as this grocery store that still looks like it was destroyed yesterday. It is a long road, and of course the people here are doing it. But with all of those stories of despair, there are also stories of hope and joy. And Mike McDaniel has been telling some of the most powerful stories that we've seen from Hurricane Ida. He's here with me now as we're in Homa, and you have one of those incredible stories of joy out of all of this.
Yeah, and this is really one of those untold stories that we didn't find out about until probably a couple of weeks ago. It involves a woman named Shawn Sievers. She did not expect to have a baby right before Hurricane Ida, but really she didn't have a choice. It did, though, lead to quite the journey, filled with some scary moments, the kindness of a stranger, and a mother's devotion. As South Louisiana prepared for the arrival of a storm last year, Shawn Sievers, down in Terrebonne Parish, was preparing for another arrival.
Planning for a hurricane, having a baby.
August 27th, 2 days before Hurricane Ida hit Louisiana, Sievers, already in early labor, went to see her doctor.
She said, okay, we need to have this baby today, or you're gonna have this baby in this category for hurricane.
Later that night, at 8:26, baby Elijah Louvier arrived. The birth was routine, but doctors realized Elijah had jaundice.
He needed what was called phototherapy, where they laid him underneath a light.
That meant mom and baby stayed put at Terrebonne General Health System in Homa. Elijah's dad went to prepare their Dulac home for the storm when the hospital went on lockdown.
It was really scary, honestly. There was at one point where the whole floor of the hospital shook.
Sievers and Elijah were among about 150 patients inside, many of them with COVID. There were about a dozen newborns.
Ida was nothing any of us had expected.
Because the storm knocked out electricity and water, hospital CEO Phyllis Peoples had to make a decision.
When we had to make the call to evacuate, that was probably one of the harder things I've ever done in my career.
Peoples says the hospital had no way to communicate with families. Patients were sent wherever space was available.
He's curious.
Unable to be cared for, Sievers and 2-day-old Elijah were sent home.
They could not physically care for him anymore. They had told us that we just needed to do our best and get him in the sun. And with the heat down here, you can't leave a baby in the sun for very long.
Grateful for the care during the storm, caring for Elijah outside the hospital was more challenging than expected.
And the next morning we got up and we looked at the baby and we noticed how yellow his skin was. And then we noticed how yellow his eyes were.
The family packed up and headed to Texas to stay with family and find medical care. Before getting to Lafayette, though, they ran out of gas. Then, the kindness of a stranger who had gas containers in his truck.
And he put the whole 10 gallons in my car and said, y'all get that baby somewhere safe because he doesn't look good.
That kind act helped get them to a hospital in Texas. But even that came with concern because Elijah didn't have a birth certificate or social security card.
We were like, okay, if something goes down, he's not a person. So when we got to Texas, we were extremely protective.
Protection gave way to relief once Elijah was well enough to go home.
I'm lucky that he's alive. I was scared, desperately scared when we left out of here, thinking that he wasn't going to make it at some points because he wouldn't cry, he wouldn't wake up, he wouldn't eat.
A year later, Elijah just celebrated his first birthday, and his birth announcement finally made it to the hospital's billboard.
He's got one heck of a birth story.
Celebrations Sievers can't help but smile about.
We always joke and say he did right coming with a hurricane because he is a hurricane. He is drama, he is outgoing, he is fun, and I am the luckiest mom on the face of the planet.
And happy birthday to Elijah. It took 4 to 5 months before baby Elijah was able to finally get that birth certificate and social security card. And because of all the damage down here in southern Terrebonne Parish, Katie, the family told me that it wasn't until Christmas Eve until they were finally able to spend their first night back in their home. They were staying with family just south of here in Homa when they got back from Texas.
That is such an incredible story. And there are so many stories like that of joy, of giving, of people who have really made the best out of the worst situation. So
Just
thanks for...
so glad everybody's okay. Mom and baby are okay. The family's doing well.
Amazing, amazing. The death toll was not higher in this storm, although some people did lose their lives. And, you know, you just hear story after story of those little tiny miracles that happened, and it really has been incredible. And another